Here's the one where I think at least where I put my money, if I could figure out exactly how to do it. And the idea here is to attach some incentives. What do you expect from an economist? Either of a carrot or a stick that would pressure, cajole, or compel doctors to do what's right and use rewards to change practice. So let me say a little bit about a little more detail than what I have on the slide here about how I think that, where that might work and how I think it might work, and then try some speculative ideas on you about how it might be framed for purposes of insurance. So the first thing to say is, obviously what economists would focus on is the financial reward from providing care. And everybody is against fee-for-service these days, except me. So I'm in favor of fee-for-service, but it has to be the right fee and it has to be the right service. So let me give you an example of what I have in mind of the wrong fee and maybe the wrong service. We all know that Medicare and everybody else, for some reason for which I don't really understand, but still overpays for services related to cardiac care. That's why the separate heart hospitals are proliferating. That's why there are high volumes of that kind of care. When I was on the Physician Payment Review Commission, and I used to say, although you didn't want to say this to the nice cardiologists on the commission, but maybe we ought to just take a meat axe to fee levels, because after all, supply at a price of zero is zero, and if we know in between how many cabbages we want done or how much angioplasty, there must be a price that will bring forth just exactly the right supply. The dilemma, of course, is that would have meant a very dramatic reduction in current payment levels, which had all sorts of political ramifications. But I guess the takeaway message here is, if you, being you the insurer or you society, know what rate of performance of a procedure you want, there actually is a fee that will get you exactly there. There must be a point on the supply curve, so you ought to go there. The dilemma is how to go there. The alternative, which of course is now what everybody's talking about, bundled payment, in theory, I guess I'm programmed to say that's got a problem. It means if you do more, you get the payment for treating this patient. That's sort of the version that Alan had up. You get the money regardless of how much or how little you do. Not that you take the money and head for Mexico, but there's zero marginal revenue for doing anything more. And I'll propose a compromise here. It's A plus BX. The right way to pay doctors is probably a marginal price. That's the X price, and B would be what that price is. X is the units, B is the price. You'd set B well below current levels, and then partly to make sure there wouldn't be a revolution amongst physicians, and partly probably because it's a good thing, you'd make a lump sum payment as well, maybe a capitation payment or maybe a fixed payment per patient, but whatever it would be. And as long as I'm anticipating here, you could tie that capitation payments to measures of outcome. There's no reason why you can't, for example, use fee-for-service and then adjust the fees depending on measures of outcome. That's kind of like redefining the service. But in this A plus BX model, you could attach the consequences of measures of quality either to the fixed payment part or the marginal payment. There's an interesting question of which is better, but at least it could be put in there. The problem with everything old is new again, with John Eisenberg and a bunch of other people at Penn, we actually wrote about bundled payment in the early 1990s, and the problems we ran into then, I think, will be problems people will run into now. How do you adjust for severity if you're going to measure outcome? Socioeconomic issues. What about people who are socially dysfunctional? We kind of know, even if we treat them properly, the outcomes will be bad. And then there's just randomness. Some people are sicker than others in ways that don't average out, even in modest-sized groups, and so how do you deal with that? So I'm optimistic, but not hopeful in the short run. In the long run, I guess I'm pessimistic about everything, but then in the long run, we know how we all are. There is, though, an alternative way of thinking about insurers using this kind of information. As I said, I think there is a way to do it, using comparative effectiveness information that you might find interesting. At least I hope so. I'll come back to that in a minute, but I want to insert it here. So this is actually what I've done with my MBA students a lot. I try to get them to think about health insurance by thinking about painfully honest but true advertising slogans. And how would you feel about managing a plan with this slogan? So one of them from years ago was, our plan is, this is the cost-containing health plan, and our slogan was, last year's technology at last year's premiums. That's not just a fanciful thought, it's actually kind of interesting to think about who would buy that. Generally the answer was no, nobody wanted to run that plan, but then what's so bad about cost growth is sort of the implication. Or there was the Philly health plan, we're not that great, but we sure are cheap. Do you have a problem with that? Which was a version of a regressive Rambo HMO, as it was known in town. What am I thinking about here? Well, I think it's kind of interesting concept to imagine, suppose you offered, marketing people would obviously have to do more work on this, but the evidence-based health insurance plan that made all of its decisions based on the best comparative effectiveness evidence and offer that at a given premium. Imagine that people could choose it versus other plans at the same premium. For example, they could choose the Art of Medicine health plan that would allow doctors to do what they choose to do. You could choose the consumer satisfaction health plan that creates its PPO based on patient judgments about which doctors they think provide the most satisfaction. I'd probably join the plan now, which is the prestigious academic medical center where I know some people health plan, and it would be interesting, I think, to see. I don't think we have too much evidence on this yet, but it would be interesting to see whether the plan that adopted comparative effectiveness and evidence-based medicine as not only its primary method of procedure, but also its primary self-descriptor, how would it do? So that's, I think, a thought worth thinking about. The other thing to be said about this is, and I guess I'll say it here, is that if comparative effectiveness does reduce cost, this is, Tom had to leave, but this would be more of an issue for an actuary. A thought is to front the cost reduction. If you really believe comparative effectiveness research will help you to reduce cost, make an estimate of what that cost is, lower the cost of your plan to that level, and see if you can create a self-fulfilling prophecy. I guess I'm partly bemused because I have tenure, but also intrigued that insurers don't really want to do that. They don't seem to exactly have the courage of their convictions, and maybe it's because they'll do anything for money and they don't really have convictions, but nevertheless, it's worth thinking about, I think.